think it's time. Let's talk about portals. First, before we go directly into portals, though, it's come to my attention that I have not yet made clear exactly how I am going into the crystal with the camera. So it really is this simple. You just take the sight on your cell phone camera and place it right up on the crystal. There really is no more physically to it than this. However, there's details about where you go into the crystal, and we'll go into that in another clip. So yes, to say, to begin, you can take a photo of the crystal at a distance, for instance, like this. And if you do, you're going to get a very different type of capture. You can even use the crystal to see who's in your physical space, who galactically is in your physical space. I often do this with the window because often they're hanging out right outside the window. I know this because they often take me out of body and they take me outside of my own windows. So you can use the crystal. You just set yourself to where the window is to the side or somewhere behind you. And then you take your camera into the crystal and move the crystal until you can see the reflection of the window behind you or to the side of you in the crystal, in the camera, in the picture site that you're going to take. And when you do this, you can see who's there with you. You can work with the crystal at any time of day or night. However, the portal seasons are when you really want to get active with it, when you're really going to get some really nice captures, and when you may be graced with a live call and be there right on the other end of the line with a being who's right there with you. Again, these are hard to capture with the camera to show other people. However, you are going to get that direct experience yourself. And in the end, that's what all of the experiences that you are going into the crystal for are for you. You can extend that out into the populace, but initially and foremost, this is for you. The most obvious portals are the sun and the moon, specifically sunrise and sunset, and with the moon, the new moon and full moon are the most obvious and largest portals. There is also the solstices, the equinoxes, the eclipses, both solar and lunar, astrological alignments, such as the Lion's Gate. In fact, this is how I came to know about portals to begin with, because it's the Lion's Gate, what they call the heliacal alignment of the Sirius star with our planet, that activated the crystal for me to begin working with the beings from Sirius, but through the crystal. It did take me a few years to discover this in physical space. The first year that it began, it of course was not obvious because it had just started and there was no observation to be made. I hadn't even at that point heard of the Lion's Gate portal. However, a few years from when it began, I would notice that I would want to tinker with the crystal during this time of year, the July-ish, early August timeframe. And I would also notice that during that time frame, it was the feline beings, many different type of feline beings who would come through. And just the feeling in me, it was always there that it was the Sirius felines. It was at this time that I started learning more about Sirius and the beings from Sirius and that whole star system to begin with. I was putting some twos and twos together with some out-of-body experiences that I had been taken through in earlier years. For instance, one of, or perhaps even the first experience that I had with my conscious state of attention was a visitation directly down into my room from a being from Sirius. It also took me many years in physical space to put the twos and twos together of where that being actually was from. But when I did, that is what I discovered. And his name is Mesahari. He's a being who actually incarnated on the Sirius star, in the Sirius star system, in the same body in two separate lifetimes. And I had them each with me in that experience, in that out of body experience. At some point in this, I gain full vision and I see a young Indian boy. He's 15 years old. I don't know that at the time he looks more like 12. But I see this young Indian boy, and he's very busy. I have 360 vision. So he's down near my feet and giving me the adjustment from my feet. And then he runs around to the front and he does something over near the crown of my head. And then he runs back to the back and does my feet and legs again. And I begin to get it. He is doing what he needs to do to keep me in the vibration that is letting me see him and that is letting me speak with him. I keep saying in my mind, oh my God, this is real. And I keep touching things. And when I touch them, more vibrations and everything is 500% clear. And feelable, everything. And I'm just so fascinated in my mind by what I'm seeing. And the only thing I want to know is if he's the one I call Naru. Are you my guide? He comes round near my ear and he says, yes and no. And there's this lingering emphasis on the no. And so I say, well, what is your name? And he says, my name is Mesahari. I'm just very curious about him. He's busy working. And at this same time, there's another Indian boy, maybe 20 years old, coming in through the door back there. And I haven't given him much attention yet. I'm still with Mesahari. The very first thing, and a vibration that's staying through this whole event, is a single sentence, and it's underlying everything that we're saying, and it's, you are coming with me now. You are coming with me now. So that was the whole energetic feeling of this, was him and the other boy, you're coming with me now, trying to get this wave of energy so that I would go with them now. At a certain point, I stand up, and I could feel that I was afraid to go through the door. And I could hear the words, you're coming with me now. And I asked him, because I didn't know, am I dying? Am I leaving my body now? And the boy tells me that I could come back to my body before this happens. Not completely relieved at hearing this and not fully understanding what that meant. The event then begins to get a little shaky. So that was my first contact with a known being from Sirius, but that only continued and switched from more humanoid to more feline-ish through the crystal, through the Lionsgate portal. When you're working with the portals, and especially when you're working with the sun, because this is going to be, of course, the main portal that you're working with, as it is the largest portal leading into our Earth system. So the first thing you want to do in order to work with the sun as a portal, not just at sunrise and sunset, but through the rays of the sun through which the signals come, is make sure that you're charging your crystal in the sun. How long you charge the crystal for is going to depend on you. Sometimes I will just set Isa out on the windowsill where the rays can strike her and the messages can be sent and left for just a few hours. And then I'll work with the crystal and see if anything's there for me. Other times I leave her there for days and days. In fact, recently I've had her there for near a month, and I'm not exactly sure why that is, other than things do seem to be advancing again and accelerating again. And the sun is just a really wonderful way to charge and make yourself ready to receive. A further way you may wish to work with the sun is to charge yourself in the sun. Years back when the awakening first began, I began the practice spontaneously of sun gazing. I was just out gardening one day, and it did happen to be at sunset, perhaps an hour before sunset. And I was just moved to stay there in the sun and not moved. I just put down what I was doing, put down my gardening, and stood over to the side where I could see the sun. And it was a beautiful peachy, yellowish, pinky color. And it was just phenomenal. I just stood there and stared. It's how it began. And it felt so good when I had finished. In fact, it felt very much like an out-of-body experience in which I had consciously entered and, by means of doing what I had just done, just stood myself there and directed myself at the sun. You do enter a depth in this experience in which the conscious mind does expand out, in which time does, in a sense, stand still or slow toward still. And I have no idea the extent of what happens when we do something like this, but I do want to say you do have to be ready, and it should almost be spontaneous. If you find yourself becoming interested in the sun gazing, there's probably a reason, but do a lot of research and be aware of whether you have or have not yet prepared yourself for such a discipline. Tritak, conscious gazing, had been a discipline of mine, a yogic discipline of mine for decades at that point. And so I did have much experience with Tritak, with meditation, with holding a focused point of attention, with candle gazing, specifically with beeswax candles for lengthy periods of time. So I did feel I had prepared myself, and the awakening had begun, and I had been starting to go out of body, and it did seem like it was apt for me to begin this practice. Now, I didn't know why at that point, but I can say now that it is a practice in which you can charge yourself in the sun. Messages are left within us as well. We ourselves, just to say further, are a portal as well, and within us are embedded stargates into our very own system. I started discovering these stargates when I started going out of body. I still don't know much about them, but I know I experienced them. I know I use the Stargate system to go out. And I don't want to venture off too much in that direction, but I will just say that these stargates within us, embedded into our own being, into our own biology, are associated with areas of the body. They're often associated with organs, such as the heart. The heart, or heart space, I should say, is an enormous portal that can be activated and utilized. The glands and glandular system is as well. The pineal, the pituitary are very large, very available portals to most people these days, I feel. So these portals can also be activated through practices like sun gazing. Also, will have something to do with the level of detail you're able to bring through when you're bringing through the contacts through the crystal. So the sun is huge. Charging the crystal in the sun, where the sun's rays can strike the crystal, is important, as well as charging yourself. If not directly in the sun, then in similar ways, you can charge yourself by moonlight as well. You can charge yourself by your very own breath as well. You can charge yourself by your very own state of attention as well, which is also a mini sun, a mini logos. And so you begin to learn about these portals, and you begin to get curious about them and wonder how you might explore them more. And as you wonder, you begin to investigate. And as you investigate, you begin to be shown. And as you begin to be shown, things start happening in your physical space that are not quite usual. The last portal I will mention is the interest of other people who are out there in the world. I did come to realize through periods of time that when it was just me and when there was not a lot of other interest, I myself did not feel activated to bring anything through. I would periodically, as I have for years now since this began, go into the crystal. But I would notice that if there did not seem to be much interest coming to me from the world, then not much of anything would come through. My groups would come through, but they would come through repeatedly, and I would rather get tired of my groups because I was wanting to see who else was out there. And that's when I began realizing the largest portal of them all. And that again would be consensus, the human consensus. Is this something that human consensus wants right now? Is it something that it feels it needs right now? And when consensus begins telling me yes, it's just incredible, incredible what begins happening. Because of this, I started doing what I call readings for people, but really they're not so much readings. People will write in with a little information and I will try to bring through a being that would like to connect with them. But I can't say that the beings that came through for that reason for sure, because I'm not going out of body meeting these beings, hearing that this is what it's for. So this is an avenue I'm still exploring, and it's not something that I do a lot, but it is something that I put out there and make available. And this is a part of how I gauge consensus and what consensus is wanting by those who do or do not write in about it, those who do or do not write, just showing interest, who show up on the board, who ask me to do podcasts, things like that. Um, and when that begins happening more, that tells me that consensus is taking off the brakes. And when consensus takes off the brakes, there's no telling where this might go. What we're seeing so far is only phase one. And I'm really excited to get to phase two. So I am putting in all my effort to keep myself fit and keep myself charged and keep ESET charged and keep the whole thing open for if and when humanity says yes. Yes to what can, will, and is trying to come through.